The ruling All Progressives Congress have zoned the party's offices, adopting the PDP formula. The party swapped position between the North and the South, zoning the chairmanship position to the North Central, while National Secretary goes to the Southwest. The equitable zoning formula for the political offices was made known after the governors' meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari. The governors also told reporters that they were in support of a new date for the party's national convention.
Then the date of the convention, the caretaker committee briefed of yesterday of their meeting, and they proposed March 26, 2022. And today the governors informed Mr. President that we have had the briefing from the caretaker committee and we are supportive of their position. Proposed zonal congresses not in the Constitution. I think there has been so much debate. Yesterday there was a statement to the effect that even the letter that had gone out was withdrawn. So, and zonal congresses are not explicitly stated in the Constitution, particularly how you do zonal congresses.
There was differences in opinion about timing. Some of us are saying the Constitution allows us to have convention even if 3 or 4 states have issues that are unresolved. Okay? While others are saying, no, let us finish all the reconciliations and we do this convention. After all, there is no time limit for the convention as long as we do it before the time for the primaries. So that was the difference. This is what the media called divided governors. In a democratic setting, there is no way you can have 22 governors plus the deputy governor of Anambra State, we are 23 now, agreeing on every issue. We have agreed a zoning formula for all the 6 geopolitical zones, and essentially we swapped. Northern zones will take positions that southern zones had in the last 8 years, and vice versa. It's a very simple, equitable, and fair formula.
So your take on this?
Well, yes. Malam El-Rufai talking about that simple and equitable formula is a really neat switcheroo. Like he just said, what used to be in the north comes down to the south. And I'm looking at the whole list now. Each of the 6 geopolitical zones gets 10 positions, apart from Southwest, which gets 9 positions, and it's all been neatly divided. South-South gets their 10. I won't bother reading it off because for the sake of time. But it's also interesting to note the context that Governor El-Rufai tried to put this reports of rifts into. He's basically saying all of that was much ado about nothing, that there were disagreements, but that does not amount to a rift. And I'm sure some people will be really relieved to note that. And it looks like progress has been made. There's also been progress on the topic, a very important topic, of the national chairman of the APC, which has now been zoned to the North Central. Unfortunately, it does leave some of the aspirants to that position. That seems to leave them out in the cold. There are reports that President Buhari is of the opinion that there should be a consensus candidate, citing historical precedent for that, with Chief Bisi Akonde, Chief John Odige Oyegun, and Adams Oshemole emerging by consensus. And while it all seems to have calmed down considerably from yesterday, when there was a lot of rancor being reported, things seem to have moved on nicely here. So for them, it's a bit of a stretch to say the party is divided. But it all remains to be seen, doesn't it? We have seen on the show, like several times, APC members, APC chieftains denying rifts and strains within the party, and other events not supporting that. But so far, so good.
Dr. Bati?
Well, maybe there are certain conclusions we need to take back. One, that the APC was experiencing a state of emergency among its ranks. Apparently, that was not exactly the case. And even if it was the case, we could see that perhaps the reconciliation efforts by the Abdullahi Adamu team has yielded some results. Because at some point, it looked like the party was divided, and we were using such phrases as the party is factionalized. But what they've been able to do, as at this morning, that the party has been able so far to project to the public a united front. That there may be disagreements, but there are no divisions, which is a major theme that the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, had worked on significantly. And I think much credit has to go to the president for providing the necessary leadership. Because you'll recall that before he traveled, we were told some governors met him, and then nothing concrete came out, either in terms of zoning or the big issues. And we were told that when the president returned from Brussels, the EU-AU summit, that those issues will be addressed. And that's precisely what has happened. And it takes leadership, for somebody to be the rallying point for you to be able to achieve that. Now, yesterday, we had Professor Medina, the director of organization of APC, on this program. And I had asked him about the issues of zoning and consensus, where he couldn't give a definite answer. So it is quite interesting to see that those two issues were two of the issues considered at the meeting of the governors, 22 governors plus Deputy Governor Anambra State, with the president. And zoning, they've adopted the PDP formula, as Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna State explained. And what that means, one clear indication there, is that there may be no doubt whatsoever that the APC has already zoned the presidency to the south.
Yes.
And when Tudu said every other zone, got 10 positions, with the exception of Southwest, that had just 9. Is that an indication that the 10th, the missing one position, if we are going to talk about equity, because the whole thing, the party was saying all of this is based on equity. Is that an indication that the APC is planning to zone the presidency to the southwest? However, it's not a question that we can explore further. But the issue, of course, is that if they zone the presidency to the south, that already will put the PDP that is talking about a level playing field, under pressure. Because there is enough lobby, there is enough, consideration for the presidency to be rotated, to come to the south. And before now we had said, look, that's the preference of even the president himself, even if nobody puts that in print so clearly. Now, as for consensus, it was also said that previous chairman of the party, Chief B.C. Akonde, Chief John Odige Oyegun, and Comrade Adams Oshiomhole emerged through the consensus agreement, and that's the president's preference. So that means when the party has its national convention ahead of the primaries, we're likely to see a situation where everything will just go smoothly because there had been a consensus. So I think it's very instructive to see that the APC, has reasserted itself, reaffirmed itself as one family. Even if in some states there are one or two issues here and there, I imagine that with the spirit with which they have emerged with these arrangements for zonal congresses and the national convention, agreeing even on the date that will be chosen, I think it's quite a major step forward for the party. The only part of it was the report in the paper saying the chairman of the Extraordinary Convention Caretaker Committee, Mai Mala Buni, governor of Yobe State, threatened to resign because he was being accused by some of the APC governors of inefficiency. I thought that would also be, has also been resolved, because he has as many, even more supporters than those criticizing him. So we hope that the PDP, the other major political party, will also take its cue from how the APC has been able to manage its affairs and also ensure that it puts its own house in order so that we can have a robust competition in the 2023 general polls.
I mean, it's exciting that politicians, the APC, closing ranks, only when you look at the rancor that a lot of people envisaged yesterday. In fact, some APC members had gone to town yesterday that they don't know what Mai Mala Buni is doing. They don't know what this, transitory committee, what they are doing, as regards the APC, that they want to cannibalize everything for themselves. But in 24 hours, that what they say, 24 hours is a long time in politics. Everything has changed. Once I saw the alert for the meeting called, I knew something was definitely going to happen. The president, which is, I still keep saying, the president is still the leader of the party one way or the other, because it's the most senior person in the party, the most high-ranking person, could call all these people to order. But some pressure points I'd like to point out with the APC, they are headwinds. This, they've been able to zone. It is still going to be out in the open, and we'd like to see if officially their zoning for presidency is going to come to the southwest, based on all of this calculation we've seen. Normally, the zeitgeist is once you zone the national chairman of the party to a certain region, the opposing region gets the presidency. Is that going to be the case? Time will tell. Because we've heard recurrently people talk about, this balancing in zoning, and the PDP pretty much led the way by saying, okay, because Yocha Ayu comes from this region doesn't mean that our presidential candidate will come from the opposing region. So let's not be too happy yet. Secondly, the headwinds in the APC, we cannot remove all of this from the challenges they are facing in Ogun. They are facing in Osun. We all saw what happened over the weekend in Osun. It was a power play. Those things, those are grief members. The APC needs to close ranks with them and bring them to the table. They might have succeeded with this, but I bet you, from the feelers we are getting and from different sources, there are so many disgruntled APC members that APC still needs to bring into the fold that still feel a big disconnect from the national level. So this might have saved the day for them. This might have won one battle for them. The question is, will it win the war leading up to the convention on the 26th of March? That's all on news headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Roto Sudiri, Michael Wilson, Adesu Omoro, and Aaron Akeja to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For a global business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson. You're not in London, you're still in South Africa.
Yes, I'm in Cape Town, quite right. Yeah. So Asia Pacific, first of all. And it's actually quite interesting to take a look at these markets because whilst the rest of the world went into Ukraine-induced confusion and volatility yesterday, Asian markets actually have been rising, not necessarily because they're taking a more mature view. I think they're probably quite relieved, as most markets will, as you probably will find today, that the so-called sanctions that the UK and the US have actually put on Russia are actually relatively weak right now. And now we may be talking about some kind of incremental action here, but for the moment, that's the view that the markets are taking. Mainland China stocks slightly higher this afternoon. I have it as well, rather in afternoon trade as far as Asia's concerned. New Zealand hiked its interest rates by 0.25%, still in isolation there, but clearly worried about inflation. Now, China's finance minister, I was talking about this a little bit with you yesterday, they've been very much now talking up the idea of tax cuts. And so we first of all saw it in the Communist Party's magazine, which was probably written late last year, but came into publication in last. It doesn't actually come out straight away; it sort of drip feeds onto the market. However, the Chinese are saying that they will cut taxes and also and fees on a rails yet. Said by about the relaxation in growth that's been happening in China. So that's what they're doing actually there. First fiscal policy is to cut taxes, and if it was about $1 trillion, $170 last year, maybe it'll be more this. Anyway, moving on to the United States then. So as I said, stock futures slightly higher this morning. It was once again big falls on the Dow and also on the NASDAQ too. The Dow fell about 490 points yesterday. S&P shed about 1%. President Joe Biden has been threatening more sanctions on the Russians after their so-called invasion of Ukraine. I say so-called because we clearly await details about that. But there are bank sanctions as well now, and there are 3 individuals which have been named by the UK. I'll come on to those in a moment. But also banks in the United States are Russia's Ukraine and all that crisis may actually complicate what the Fed does about interest rates in the United States. That's because tensions have pushed the oil price higher, and consumer spending is 70% of the US. So they've got to be very, very careful about actually spend money. EU, let's talk about Swiss banks. We saw those revelations about Credit Suisse over the weekend. It's really complicating the way in which the whole the Swiss financial community is dealing with it. Some of the banks are saying, yes, of course, we have secrecy is our power, but if that goes, and the Swiss government and the regulatory authorities there sign up to more openness, which they've been doing for the past 10 years, then what advantage do the likes of UBS and Julius Baer, as well as Credit Suisse, actually have over their peers? So that's what they're going through right now. The EU, staying with that, and Germany has halted approval of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Some would say not before time. This is just a temporary move, quite honestly, because soon Europe will start crying out for more gas supplies, and maybe the Germans will have to think again. But so far, they've said that they are halting final approval of Nord Stream. It's all built. It's just the regulatory things that have to go through right now. Now, as I was saying, the UK has also joined banks and also 3 individuals. The individuals are quite want them, but the point is that these individuals are part of Putin's inner circle, and this has been a problem for the security service. In the past, what's happened, it's been quite easy to find out what's been happening in Russia, but so tight is Putin's inner circle right now that actually happening what they mean when they actually say something. And the problem is that what we're thinking is that it's very difficult to find out what the true thought is. It probably resides in the mind of who that is, and as far as oil and gold are concerned, spiking up on the usual counter demand. So I think overall what we're seeing is that these so-called sanctions are much weaker than people had been expecting. It's very much the same old thing, What really would hurt Russia is lack of access to dollar, sterling and euro markets, because they are the 3 major currencies in which people trade, as you know. If that were to stop, then I think there would be trouble, but that's the way ahead at the moment. That's the global view.
Right. Thank you so much, Michael. Can I go? Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Michael, once again. The truth of the matter is sanctions don't work. They just kick the can down the road, and we all know that. But 2 things I'd like to talk about. Number 1 will be inflationary pressures. We already saw those inflation headwinds coming up this year because of the recovery from COVID, and now this will be precipitated by the Russian crisis. How will the world react to all of this? And I'm saying this because of developing economies like Nigeria that have dollar-denominated loans that once those interest rates go up, the loans definitely go up. So it gets to affect us. That's 1. Number 2 will America dare push Russia out of that SWIFT financial system? Will it happen? And what will be the repercussions all over the financial sector in the world?
Okay, first of all, I hate to contradict you, but I do think sanctions actually work. What they do is they actually remind people, of the international will that is now against Russia as we speak. And we do need to remember that Russia needs the rest of the world as much as the world thinks it needs Russia. So that's, I think, number 1. But you're quite right to focus on SWIFT. That would be a big one. We've had warnings already from people in the EU saying that any kind of attempt to hurt Russia internationally, and as far as the international markets are concerned, would have knock-on effects for all the international markets. That's certainly true. What that argument misses, though, is that it's actually when you do it. If you were to do it now, and then and give the rest of the world a chance to cope with that, then I think it would be very say now, and there will be repercussions from Russia all the way around the world. So the SWIFT international payment system would stop. Russia would be excluded from it. That is the way forward, because what we should never forget is that Russia needs the rest of the world as much as we need it. And as I said earlier, it's access to dollars, sterling and euros, which are the international currency world, needs to be squeezed. Quite right, of course, to focus on means for dollar-denominated debt. That's for individual countries to work out. They will be very, very wary of a stronger dollar. However, they should have been thinking about this a long, long time ago. I'm sure they have, not because and Russia. The pressure on the Fed to increase interest rates has been something that you and I and you in this program have been talking about for many months, and we're not alone in that.
What do you make, Mr. Wilson, of critics of Boris Johnson's sort of opening salvo here, that it's really too tepid, that it's a bit of a damp squib with regards to the sanctions against Russia? And do you think that he's having to balance certain interests, such as the cost of living crisis in the UK, the heat or eat options that people are facing? Does that play into why he's been more measured?
I agree with you. I think that the cost of living crisis is something which everybody faces, particularly the United Kingdom. If I were a politician, I'd be much more about that of Ukraine and Russia. Let's just look at the three individuals in a they were subject to sanctions when Russia invaded Crimea. You've got Timchenko and then the two Rotenbergs, who actually, yes, they are bankers. They're connected to the Russian financial system, but they all grew up with Putin, and they're all part of his inner circle. And they've been through this before. I suspect this will be like throwing darts at a tank. They'll just brush this off. I think, as Rafai was saying earlier on, the real thing is to stop Russian access to international currencies. If politicians around the world can do that, weighing up whether or not their own economies, then I think that will be this.
Question of sanctions, Michael. The other question would be: would there be enough cohesion? Would there be enough power, enough willpower on the part of the allies to sustain the attack on Russia? And as you said, Putin himself may not really be bothered. He's been through it before, and he probably had managed to provide enough defenses. And the rest of the world will be affected by this gas station of the world, But let's go beyond that and talk about Credit Suisse. The EU Parliament, the European People's Party, one of the major political groupings in the European Union Parliament, is saying that Switzerland should be blacklisted, should be put on the list of high-risk financial systems on the basis of the Swiss secrets and those revelations. And even in the parliament in Switzerland itself, the Green Party is asking for a reform of Article 47, which will address the privacy regulations under which Swiss banks operate. Now, if this were to happen, what would be the collateral damage, either for clients or also for the banking system in Switzerland itself? And then you talked about China. China introduced a new fiscal policy. Retirement benefits will be paid, money will be made available to local governments, and technological efforts will be made to be more self-reliant and all of that. But the question is, those finance ministry officials, nobody made mention of the real estate sector in China, which is a major source of revenue for the local areas. Was that deliberate, or you think, this is in response to the crisis in that sector?
I think that what you're seeing in China is a response to the crisis of the pandemic actually slowing growth within the country as they go for their lockdowns. I'm not surprised talking about tax cuts. Remember, they've not said by how much. They've been very wary about putting figures on this. And this is how a central government, a central autocratic government, runs its economy. And remember, Doctor, we haven't actually heard much about our favourite topic of conversation, which is Evergrande. We haven't heard about that. Haven't heard about the property sector in China for a few weeks. What do you think is actually going on there? Are they gradually moving away from that? Are they gradually dismantling it? It's all a mystery. I think that the major worry will now be as to when you were talking about sanctions and the rest, or not, Russia actually pivots to China for support, given that there may be some concentrated international effort. That was your second question. I think there will be. I think the allies will actually get together. There is international condemnation about this. And the truth of it, if there is, is people, if you were to take politicians and policymakers down to the argumentative bone, I think what they would be saying is, do you know what? This is Putin actually playing away for home benefit, because there is no advantage to them to Russia taking Ukraine apart from taking advantage of its huge, massive resources. But again, if there's a crack, who's actually going to feel as though there will be concerted effort? I think if you can get Europe together, all the different states in Europe, which we know, there's many, many of them, all speaking with different voices, and it seems as though they are actually speaking as one voice right now, then I think that's probably good. That will give you an indication of the kind of international feeling there is towards Russia and this incursion in Ukraine. As far as finally Switzerland is concerned, if their unique selling point, as I said earlier, is secrecy, then that's going away. I think these banks now, the Credit Suisse obviously, but they've got their own problems and a lot of cleaning there. UBS, two major Swiss banks, they are going to have to say, all right, it's not just about secrecy, this is how we're going to improve our services. A whole new ball game probably for them as well. And certainly that call from within the European Union's most popular party that you mentioned will actually resonate right through Switzerland at the moment. You will hear a lot of rejection from it from the Swiss financial authorities. They're saying that we are trying to clean things out, but there's a lot to do there, clearly.
Well, thank you very much, Marco.
Now, our dependable Rotis Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotis.
Morning, Tunde. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Welcome back, man. Good to see you again.
Birthday boy.
Hey, thank you. So we begin with oil and gas. Essentially, OPEC's next meeting, March 2nd, they're going to decide on their next production targets. And we've got Iraq's energy minister, Mr. Ihsan Jabbar, there he is on your screen right now, saying that, well, OPEC shouldn't move production any further or get more aggressive. They should maintain the 400,000 barrels per day. Timmy Presilva agrees with him. Joe Biden, on the other hand, and Boris Johnson, they don't. They want OPEC to increase production. So let me back up a bit. Mr. Jabbar from Iraq is saying that, well, OPEC is going to consider the output of non-OPEC producers in their calculations for total global production. So they're going to consider Brazil, they'll consider Norway, they'll consider Canada, and so on and so forth. Timmy Presilva, he's saying, well, we should also look at the Iran nuclear deal and the positive talks that are coming out of there. If that happens, then Iran comes to the market with their oil. And I think Iran does what, 4.4 million barrels per day. Now, Joe Biden, on the other hand, and Boris Johnson, they're saying, no, OPEC should increase production because, look at oil prices right now. If you are an oil producer who, save for Nigeria, your infrastructure is fine and you're able to pump out volumes because revenue is a subject of price and volume, right? And you can take advantage of that and you don't have subsidies that are eating into your revenue. Just putting those caveats aside. If you are an oil producer, high oil prices are good for you, but they are bad for everybody else. Higher oil prices, there's inflationary impacts from there. We just talked about the airline operators of Nigeria just last week agreed to increase the base fare because of where jet fuel is going. So Johnson and Biden, they want OPEC to ramp up production in order to bring prices down. Of course, the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing is why $100 per barrel oil is not far away. But as far as Nigeria and Iraq, they have production issues. Iraq has issues with weather situations affecting their productions at their sites. Nigeria, of course, we had the This Day newspaper investigation that showed like $29 billion over the last 6 years has been lost to oil theft. Infrastructure in Nigeria is old, it's creaky. So those are the reasons not being put forward, that you have Iraq and Nigeria coming forward and saying, hey, don't be aggressive. Oil prices are high enough as there is. Production is fine, so keep it steady. But the International Energy Agency, the IEA, did say that for the second half of this year, global demand, as long as there's no new variants and other matters, demand should increase, which will support prices being sustained where they are. So it's a lot going on there. But the gist of it, the reason why Iraq and Nigeria are pushing against this, because they cannot meet up with an increase in fact, as it is now, we went through GDP figures for Q4. Nigeria's 1.5 million barrels today is the lowest we've seen since 2020 or so, or even since 2016. So as it is now, Nigeria can't even meet up with production targets now, not to talk of if OPEC should meet March 2nd and decide to increase their production output again, won't meet up. So that's the gist of that. To pensions, there was a hearing. Look, these hearings we have here in Nigeria where the government comes out and engages with the public and journalists on debating bills, very important. The Director General of PENCOM, regulator for the pension industry, came out to dissuade the Nigerian police force from exiting the defined contribution scheme. So, of course, Nigeria used to be under a defined benefit scheme and moved to defined contributions with, of course, the reform of the Pensions Act. And the difference is, of course, with a defined benefit scheme, you essentially calculate how much an employee has earned over a course of time using their salary and then give them a lump sum at the end of their tenure. That's defined benefits. And by the way, the Nigerian military is under that. They moved in 2010. The Nigerian police force wants to move to a defined benefit scheme. We're under a defined contribution scheme right now, which is different in that your salary in increments over the course of your tenure goes towards your pension, and then you get incremental payments over the course of your retirement. Now, the Nigerian police force, they're complaining about issues with not being paid their benefits, and they want to move to what the military is doing. But the Director General of PENCOM came out at this hearing and said, listen, if you do that, you are going to add about 1.8 trillion naira in additional costs to the federal government, because the defined benefit scheme is the load is carried by the federal government, and that will add a lot to their costs. And can the federal government afford that at this time when we're facing revenue issues? So they're saying that, look, let's talk about this, keep things as they are. I think, 63% of pension assets are invested in government securities, so that would also, there'll also be an impact there. They essentially want the police to keep things where they are. But look, as we all know, there have been issues with pension payments. I mean, the money goes somewhere. Why aren't they paid out to retirees when they come due? So those are a number of issues that they looked at. The hearing will actually also, I think there was an amendment to criminalize the slow payouts of retirement benefits to retirees. So, there's a lot of issues there, but, the PENCOM wants the defined contribution scheme to remain in place, and they want the Nigerian police force to remain in there. To South Africa, MultiChoice is looking at ending password sharing on DSTV Now, their streaming service. And, well, essentially, if you get a streaming service, it's not just them. Arise, Play, Netflix, every other streaming service out there is facing this issue of password sharing, where you can simultaneously stream content from your single subscription on multiple devices. So this is a perfect example. We got 4 phones on this table right now. So if Tundu has the subscription, she can share her password with Rufai, myself, and Doctor, and we can all watch Tundu's Netflix or Arise Play or streaming services all on our phones. So what MultiChoice wants to do, they want to end the ability for Tundu to be able to stream on multiple devices at the same time. Yeah, they want only Tundu's phone will be able to stream at that particular time, cutting the rest of us off, and it's a challenge all the streaming services are.
I mean, it obviously makes sense for their bottom line, but
of
it
course.
does rather ruin things for everybody else.
Right,
but I wanted your opinion on this burning topic du jour, the sanctions, the first tranche of sanctions that have been imposed against Russia. I mean, not quite as dramatic as one might have hoped, apart from Germany, of course.
Right.
But how does this affect us here in Nigeria?
Look at what's happened with gas, right? Look at the cost of cooking gas, LPG, over the last year or so. I mean, what is it, 40-50% climb? Come down marginally. Russia is responsible for 17 or 18% of the total global supply of natural gas. So if anything that hampers supply at this point feeds into the price increase that you've seen in the UK that has filtered down to Nigeria, because unfortunately our domestic demand has to be augmented by importing gas in here. So it's a price increase and inflationary impact that you're going to see.
Let's talk about pension.
Pensions, yes.
Yeah, the National Assembly is trying to take a look at the Pension Reform Act of 2014. And the proposal is to amend specific sections of it. Section 1, 7, 28, 99, dealing with some of those issues you raised. And under that, the police, had applied to be taken out of the contributory pension scheme, as the military did before now. And I guess the reason some of these government departments, agencies, or some others want to pull out of it is also has to do with a response to how the contributory pension scheme has been managed so far, okay? And that's why some want out, because they don't get their pension benefits on time, the bureaucracy is excessive, and also in terms of management of pensions, we've had one or two, major scandals. But I find the defense of the DG PENCOM, I think her name is Aisha Umar also.
Umar, yes, correct.
Yes, I find it very robust, very articulate, presentation. As reported in the papers, she was saying that, look, if this were to happen, if the police were to pull out, the cost to the federal government of Nigeria will be about 1.84 trillion, and that will affect government's fiscal policy. And a major theme was that, look, if there are problems, address those problems.
Yeah.
And she even went ahead to make specific recommendations, which I think, the lawmakers should probably pay attention to. She was saying, look, these policemen, they want to move from contributory pension scheme to direct benefit scheme. Yeah. Now, what is the meaning of that? Under the direct benefit scheme, they can take up front as benefits 75% of whatever exists for them as pension. She now said, so how do you sustain it? If you've taken 75% and you spend it, then how do you collect, those benefits for the rest of your existence? So, and I think that is a very good point in that regard. And she said, look, if salary is the problem of the police, why doesn't government consider increasing the salary of policemen? And two, she said, why don't we have social security benefits provided for in the Constitution? If there is social security, everybody will not be focusing on that, pension. And that the main challenge is how to sustain and deepen the quality of the contributory pension scheme. I thought that those are great ideas that anyone should consider. As for this DSTV streaming, what are they up to? No, they should place people before profit.
Always.
If you run a business, would you run it that way?
No, that's what you are saying. The emphasis should be on people, not on profit.
We should free.
What do they want us to do? Because we are enjoying the current regime. 10 of you can watch. You only need to share password.
Why ever not?
Yeah, what kind of extreme capitalism?
Real quickly, Roscoe. Yeah. For me, I'm sad this morning.
Yeah.
I'm a sad man because if Nigeria had invested in gas over the years, this Russian crisis would make Nigeria a super rich country.
Right.
I thought they were planning to do a gas pipeline from here to Morocco and across to Europe.
They're still working on that one.
If that was on stream, Nigeria could have made easily 40, 50 billion cool dollars from this gas mishap that is happening now, precipitated by this Russian crisis. And that's why I keep asking, Nigeria is a great country, but we need to look ahead and think. It's just like the problem we're having with crude oil.
Right.
Yeah, we said that's our mainstay, but we can't even meet quotas because of thefts. Is it evil spirits that are stealing the fuel in this country?
Exactly, good question.
No, but look at Russia's foreign reserves. Part of why the sanctions are not going to hit Russia. $460 billion.
In
foreign
reserves. What is our own foreign reserve?
That's
a lot to be sad about if you think about it.
The gas pipeline you refer to, Rufai, is in the pipeline. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Rose. Now for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Omora is here with us. Good morning, Adesua.
Good morning, Tunde. Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning and welcome back, Rufai.
Sweet Sui, how are you? I missed you. Good to see you.
Thank you. We all missed you. Good to have you back.
Good to see you, Sui.
Yeah. So let's look at the data from the pandemic. Yesterday, the WHO released its weekly epidemiological report, and we now know that the number of weekly COVID-19 deaths actually dropped for the first time since early January this year. According to that report, COVID deaths fell by 8% to about 67,000 worldwide in 7 days. And again, that's a drop first time since early January. But the number of new deaths rose in the Western Pacific and Africa. Two out of the six WHO regions in the world. Meanwhile, new infections around the world fell 21% in that same week, marking the third consecutive week of a drop in infections. The WHO says there were about 12 million infections in that 7 days. While the Western Pacific was the only region that saw an increase in infections with a 29% jump. Country-wise, the highest number of COVID-19 cases were seen in Russia, Germany, Brazil, the US, and South Korea. Well, the WHO also reported that available vaccine evidence show that booster vaccination substantially improves vaccine effectiveness against the Omicron variant, but says details are still needed on how long such protection lasts. Remember that the WHO had initially been against booster doses, pleading with wealthier countries to shelve the plans, but now it's saying there's a bit of evidence. There's evidence to show that booster shots does actually work effectively against the Omicron, but doesn't know how long that lasts. We'll talk more about the Omicron in a bit, but let's look at the data coming out from Nigeria. Nigeria has recorded 27 new infections and no COVID deaths in the past 24 hours. The infections were reported from Lagos, Katsina, Kano, Rivers States, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. Meanwhile, the NPHCDA says it is working to vaccinate 600,000 eligible people daily. And it says it plans to do this up from the current 200,000 average it is recording at the moment. This was made known yesterday as the country launched the second phase of its scale strategy for COVID-19 mass vaccination. The first phase was launched last year in November. Essentially, what this means is to decentralize the vaccination process to improve coverage and access, where health officials in Nigeria hope that this phase will see the country move greatly towards herd immunity of vaccinating 70% of its targeted population by rolling out the over 30 million single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine that it has. The WHO Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Mashitizo Moeti, was present there. She praised Nigeria for the vaccination efforts. Another guest was the UNICEF country rep, Peter Hawkins. He also praised Nigeria for the vaccination towards COVID-19 so far. Away from Nigeria to Hong Kong, guys, we've been keeping an eye on Hong Kong. Now it's implementing its toughest COVID-19 measures yet as it battles that infection surge. Well, all residents in Hong Kong will now be tested for COVID-19 starting next month. It is compulsory to get tested. And those who now come down with positive tests, even though they are not showing symptoms, otherwise known as asymptomatic, will be required to isolate. And finally, the WHO, as I promised earlier, has been speaking on the Omicron variant. This time around, they're talking about the cousin of the initial Omicron, which is the BA2. We know it as the BA2 variant of the Omicron. Well, the WHO says that samples from people from various countries has now revealed that the BA2 strain of the Omicron coronavirus is not more severe than the initial BA1. A senior official of the WHO yesterday briefing in a virtual conference said many countries have seen a substantial amount of circulation of both the BA1 and the BA2.
Okay, Adesua, let's start with the figures. Do we really know what the mortality rate with regard to COVID is? And I'm raising that question. I haven't read a piece written by a guy called Adams in the journal Nature. And he was saying, and he was talking about what he calls excess mortality. That look, in these countries, the kind of, modeling system that is used with regard to COVID management differs significantly. And that in some countries, data was not recorded early. And that in some other countries, the kind of approach that they adopt will be different from that of other countries, and that we may not really know the exact figure with regard to mortality. And I think that, that's a question that people can worry about. Although he admitted that what is provided as a standard is the situation you have is the report from the Johns Hopkins University, which, many of us, yes, in the US, which many of us rely on to know what is going on. And now, again, still on COVID, not Hong Kong, Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was able to get approval, parliamentary approval, with support from the left-leaning opposition party to get that Emergencies Act of 1988, the application of it to stop those Freedom Convoy truckers. So he got support about 185 to 121, although you have some groups still threatening to go to court to challenge it, in terms of the legal details. But he was very firm in defending his decision to invoke that old law, the Emergencies Act, and that it's to restore public order, to provide more support for the police. And in a sense, it would seem to have succeeded a bit with it. Finally, Nigeria. The skills, 2.0 strategy that you referred to. The minister made it clear that, yes, when it was first applied, they just discovered that although Nigerians would take the first dose, many were reluctant to go and take the second dose. And now he's saying the country has, more than enough Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine, and that people should take advantage of this. And I guess that many Nigerians will be more comfortable with a single-dose vaccine rather than you take the first one and then you go back a second time. So I think that in this regard, both the Ministry of Health and the NPHCDA, they are onto a good thing if they can just ensure that we have enough Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccines.
And still on that NPHCDA announcement, I think it's really important that now they're integrating the COVID-19 vaccination with the regular routine childhood vaccinations. And I think that will also help address a lot of vaccine hesitancy, because a lot of people who are quite happy to have their children be vaccinated still sort of think that COVID-19 is some particularly sinister situation, and it's more political than scientific. It has no medical basis whatsoever. Yeah. They've been brainwashed by the extreme right wing on the political spectrum. So I think it's also really good to have this integration to just show that this is about medicine, it is about science and nothing else. Yeah. I'm not sure, Rufai?
All right, truth has to be said. Number one, the vaccines work. Yeah. The science proves it. They're empirical proof. I know you can make the long argument about data and stats and infinite variables and the fact that you can't adequately measure, but 3 out of 4, 5 out of 6, in a randomized sample size, it works. That's the empirical proof. Whatever anybody's doing in Canada, they're just funny. They're just funny people, and I don't get it. They're just funny people. 3 years ago, nobody said we must take a COVID-19 vaccine because we had no COVID. Now we have a pandemic, we must take what is a remedy for it. And we've seen the effect of this. The world has opened up. In England, from the 11th of February, there is no need for a day 2, lateral flow test any longer. Everybody has opened up. The world is moving back. Hence you see demand in crude oil prices. Hence you see demand everywhere. People want to get back to their lives. And the vaccine is the recipe. Concerning the data and stats, yes, because you cannot adequately account for every variable when it comes to the data set of the number of deaths. What data representation and statistical analysis will just show you is a broad spectrum of an idea, which is a plus or minus range. And that's why you see that even in statistical interpretation, you have plus or minus 5, plus or minus 6. So it's a degree of the people that have died. And what Johns Hopkins is producing out is a degree of the people that have died. It could be plus or minus X10 or plus or minus X20 or less than that. The most important thing for all of us is that has COVID killed a lot of people? Hell yeah, it's killed a lot of people. And what's the recipe? We must take the vaccines.
Such a disaster. Well, thank you so much, Adesua.